As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. And in the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you are on, you are welcome here. Please. The chalice we light is a symbol of our faith. It binds us together as one people, a reminder that our strength is in our shared hope for the world, and that our common work is the creation of beloved community among ourselves and in the world. From Pat Uribe Lichty. Once again, welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. As always, there is so much that is going on. Always make sure you check out your West Shore Weekly that's in your order of service and in your email about lots of events coming up and many, many ways to get involved. I am super excited this morning to be here again with Dr. Andy Burnette, our speaker this morning, who is now serving as the Director of Clinical Pastoral Education at the Cleveland Clinic since June of last year. He was a chaplain fellow, a staff chaplain, and a ACPE certified educator candidate at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland Veterans Affairs Medical Center from 2020 to 2024. He is a board certified chaplain endorsed by the Humanist Society. And there is more information about Dr. Burnette in your order of service, including an interesting hobby called surf ski racing that we'll need to ask you more about after the service. If you are here for the first or second time and you don't mind letting others know, would you raise your hand? Give us a wave. Awesome. Welcome. And for a couple minutes while our children go to their classes, let's just take some time to greet each other. The greeting time will end with the sounding of the bowl and then the singing together of our sacred land acknowledgement. Good morning again. I'm really honored this year to be nominated to serve on the West Shore Board of Trustees. In the notice that went out, it says I've been a member since 2017, but if you ever look at my name tag, you'll see that I asked them to add 1994 to 2004, because I was also a member then. I went away for a while, and then I re-engaged around 2015. And I want to share that because at that time, my oldest child was having a pretty challenging transition to high school, and I convinced her to give the youth group here at West Shore a try. It wasn't immediate, but she ended up with a powerful new community and wonderful experiences like a number of regional youth conferences and leadership training. It really made a big difference in her life, and as a parent, brought me great joy. More recently, a member of this congregation called to check on me after I had been absent for a few Sundays, knowing that I had been struggling, probably like many of you, pretty hard after the election. I want to thank Michael Boyle, my coffee hour buddy. It meant so much to me that you cared enough to reach out. And I have many other stories about how this faith community has been there during my darkest, most painful moments, and has provided many times of laughter and fun and helped build truly lasting friendships. Not too long ago, I was able to try my hand at improv comedy thanks to a service auction offering. I won't be going to Second City anytime soon, but it was a hoot. Thank you, Scott and Dawn. There are so many ways each of us can build our own story here at West Shore, a story that continues with each new experience, each Sunday coffee hour. Just look again at the many opportunities in your order of service, people sharing their gifts, supporting one another, strengthening our spirit through food, art, meditation, and in so many other ways. Together we create a refuge for the soul and a collective voice that stands always on the side of love. Right now is the part of the service where we do what we can to support this beloved community with our financial gifts. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Dr. Burnette asked me to share a reflection this morning on a time when I experienced empathy. Empathy asks us to relate to others in ways that help us imagine being in someone else's situation, or even to experience the emotions that other people experience. One of the struggles many of us may find ourselves in, given what is happening in our country and around the world, is how to balance empathy with self-care. How do we not drown in the emotions of so many lives being torn apart, so much power being consolidated in the hands of a few? I see the story of Mahmoud Khalil's arrest, for example, a green card holder arrested for his political activism, taken from New York to a jail in Louisiana, and the heart clenches. Recognizing the panic of being faced with the power of the state against an individual. My empathy comes not just as a human who cares for another's rights, but as someone who has a loved one who was arrested at one of those college protests a while back. It has been awful to see how these young people have been treated and how their lives continue to be turned upside down due to their peaceful protest against genocide. But I am not going to focus on that this morning for my reflection on empathy. Instead, I want to share a little bit about the elders in my life. For many years, there was always someone who I made a pointed effort to visit, take on outings, and be their ride to holiday gatherings and special events. People like my Grandpa Fred, my Grandma Liz, and our dear friend Helen. Helen was the mother of one of my best friends. After my friend moved to the West Coast, Helen came to all the holidays with my large extended family. When my kids were little, Helen helped me watch them and became a beloved bonus grandmother. She was a storyteller and a deeply loving and kind person. She experienced many tragedies in her life, any one of which could have turned her into a bitter person. Instead, she maintained the view that as long as she was able to help any one person, her life had meaning and purpose. She supported her family for years by working as a waitress, and for 20 years volunteered at a local domestic violence shelter, reading and entertaining children while their mothers were getting care and support. Spending time with her wasn't just about empathy, but empathy was also a significant driver. From a very young age, for whatever reason, I was acutely aware of and could feel the loneliness that may come with aging. I knew that each of us, with fortune, will one day be that elderly person welcoming company. Helen passed away 2 years ago, and I find myself missing her frequently. Included with that is some regret about times when I'd allow a month or two or more to pass without a visit. In my busy life then, as a working mom, it was all too easy to do. I wish I had taken her on more outings, besides holidays, like a day we went to Lakewood Park and enjoyed the sun and a picnic during a time when both of my then adult children were in town. Empathy and love and my own growing wisdom as I aged increased the consistency of my visits with Helen towards the end of her life. When she passed away, it was the first time in my adult life when I didn't have anyone elderly to visit or offer to take on an outing or bring to family gatherings. It's been a strange and unexpected void. And one day recently, I realized, kind of with shock, I'm the elder. I am someone else's elder who needs more visits and calls. What? How did that happen? My 2 adult children are off pursuing their lives outside of Ohio. Nieces and nephews and other young adults who live in the area are busy building theirs. Now I hope that empathy will touch their hearts as the days and years pass, that they will continue to think every once in a while to visit their sweet, aging Aunt Terri, who will entice them with good food, some shared wisdom, hopefully some laughter, and ongoing opportunities for them to build up some good karma for what we all pray will be their own long and fruitful life. May it be so. And now you are invited to come forward to share from the heart in our community ritual for all that is our lives. bring so much with us in our hearts and in our souls when we gather. And these are the joys and sorrows which, in Reverend McCarr's absence, will be shared with Kathy Strouser, head of our pastoral care team, and held with care until his return.
We Thank you, choir, for your charge to us to draw the circle wide. And it's so good to be with you this morning, to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new ones. So appreciate Reverend Anthony for the invitation and you all for being here this morning. Several years ago now, I was exercising. I was kicking one of those boxing bags when I felt a stabbing pain in my left heel. It came and went for a while, and then over the days to come, it hurt more often than it didn't. So I limped to the doctor, and he told me that I'd ruptured my Achilles tendon. I would need surgery. I'd have to spend a week or two being mostly immobile, which is not a skill that I possess really. And then I would be on a knee scooter for a while. So after a few weeks staying in the house, being grumpy, driving my family crazy, the knee scooter was liberation. I decided to take my kids to a comic book convention to celebrate. Yeah, so they're in the 100-degree Phoenix heat, in a crush of people dressed like Batman and Wonder Woman and Naruto. We approached a downward slope. I lifted up my healthy foot to accelerate to get to the top, and I was immediately careening down the hill, out of control, into the costumed crowd. I don't remember everything about my free fall. I recall the horror on my kids' faces as they saw their dad shooting down the hill. I was having waking nightmares about another surgery. Then out of nowhere, a crack in the sidewalk stopped me cold. And although I managed to stay upright, I did so with the involuntary help of someone in the crowd. I fell into somebody. They turned around in a flash of anger, but when they saw me, their anger disappeared. And as I apologized, they said, "No worries, I used to be on one of those things." That little connection, and with it their ability to put themselves in my shoes, changed the way they related to me in that moment. We're talking this morning about empathy. Essentially, as Terri said, the ability to put ourselves as best we can into the experience of another. It's a powerful tool for peace and community, and I think even our own mental health. We always have some identification with the person across from us, but sometimes we have to dig for it. And that's why I say empathy is a practice. Empathy helps us stay in meaningful connection with those whom we perceive as different from us. But lately, empathy is taking arrows from all sides. Some of the attacks on empathy are not surprising. Elon Musk said, quote, "The fundamental weakness of Western society is empathy." He calls it, quote, civilizational suicidal empathy. And he thinks California providing health insurance to the poorest of its citizens is prime evidence of the rot that empathy always leads to. Elon Musk thinks empathy will destroy the society he so wants to build, so I figure that alone tells me it's probably worth working toward. But it isn't just the right who are critiquing empathy. Some scholars point to vulnerabilities with it, like over-identification with people that can lead to burnout. But I figure instead of scrapping empathy, we might do better as again Terri hinted at this morning, to work on self-care and boundaries. It's possible. But they say there are other problems with empathy too. This is an extended quote from a BBC article talking about the work of Yale psychologist Paul Bloom. Bloom tells the story of a 10-year-old girl named Sherry Summers who has a fatal heart disease. Doctors have placed Sherry on a waiting list for a treatment that will relieve her pain and potentially prolong her life. Sadly, this very bright, very brave girl learns she has weeks or months before that happens. Imagine how that feels, how it will affect Sherry's life. What would you do if you had the opportunity to bump her up to the top of the list? When participants in a study were presented with Sherry's fictional story, encouraging them to feel empathy for her, about 3/4 of the people in that study moved her to the top of the list to get her treatment earlier. Yet, as Bloom points out, doing so could mean that every other child above her on the list would have to wait even longer, many of whom might be more deserving, however you measure that. This is an example of what psychologists call identifiable victim effect. People are a lot more likely to open their hearts and their wallets when there's a visible beneficiary whose pain could be alleviated. The charity that campaigns with a single story of a named suffering child, the article concludes, may win more donations compared with the charity that deploys statistics describing 1,000 anonymous children. But I would submit that that's not a problem with empathy. It's a problem with the way information is presented to us and a challenge to the way we process it. Certainly it's a problem with the competition that's fostered by a for-profit healthcare system. It's maybe a problem with a lack of curiosity, maybe our lack of time and attention to conduct a fuller investigation, but still, even in this example, an imperfect empathy connects us with this child, even when the system is too easily exploited. We sometimes just need to do a little more homework, but again, taking away empathy would be a ridiculous answer to that dilemma. So, assailed though it may be, I would join with philosopher Hannah Arendt when she says, "The death of human empathy is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture about to fall into barbarism." I'd say empathy is essential if we're going to get the kind of connections we need to keep our humanity and our communities together in these times. So, what is empathy? Or, as it's often called, and I prefer, perspective taking. As I've already suggested, it's essentially the ability to imagine ourselves in another person's perspective, which allows us to connect with them at a deeper level, see them as more fully human as we are. But it's important how we do that. It's easiest and probably most automatic to put ourselves in another person's shoes as ourselves. So we imagine ourselves in someone else's situation with all of our beliefs, with all of our values and experiences, and a lot of times we come out saying something like, "I would never act like that," or "I would never do such a thing." And that's true, because you don't have their values and beliefs and experiences. Usually, we view other people's actions through the lens of how they affect us. I spent several years working as a chaplain at the VA, including a number of veterans with PTSD. Some of those veterans yelled and got red-faced and reacted in a way that seemed way out of proportion to what was going on around them. Imagining what I would do in that situation wasn't helpful because I hadn't had the combat and other traumatic experiences of these veterans. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know their situation. But talking to them and imagining them stuck in a loop of trauma triggering that they can't escape built my empathy, which led me to study the effects of trauma and helped me become a more calm, centered spiritual care provider for them. It's important when we're perspective taking, we're practicing empathy, to imagine the other person with what we know of their values, their experiences, and their beliefs, not our own. Now, you may rightly say, I can't fully know another person. And it's true that empathy is not perfect. But completely assuming somebody else's identity is not the goal of empathy. There's a great book on empathy called The Space Between, How Empathy Really Works. It's listed in your order of service today. It's by Heidi Maibaum, who's a philosophy professor at University of Cincinnati. She offers an example in her life of what empathy can do. So she was coming up to Cleveland from Cincinnati to visit some friends as the country was coming out of the worst of the COVID pandemic. She had a serious 5-week bout of COVID recently, but a few weeks before she was traveling, she had recovered, was feeling better. She was only seeing one person in person, that was her therapist, whom she wanted to see the week before she came on the trip. But a friend whom she was visiting asked her not to see the therapist before coming to Cleveland out of fear of being infected. At first, Dr. Maibaum was really frustrated. But then she said she practiced empathy. And she writes, quote, I thought, how would I feel if I were in my friend's position? I imagine knowing someone, me, who had been seriously ill for 5 weeks. I thought about how badly I wanted not to get infected, and then imagined a guest who was indoors with a therapist for an hour a week. I got it. My irritation dissipated, and I rearranged my appointment with my therapist to see her online, end quote. Dr. Maibaum knew that she wasn't thinking and feeling the exact same way as her friend, but she could imagine how her friend might be feeling. She got something important. She writes, what did I get? A sense of what matters to my friend. So a couple things about this example. First, notice that Dr. Maibaum's emotions are changed by her practice of empathy. She was feeling irritated, which is rooted in anger, but when she was able to imagine what her friend might be feeling, her irritation dissipated and was replaced with understanding. She realized that if she were in her friend's situation, she might do the same thing. Empathy, or perspective taking, as I've called it here, can change our emotions, and by that, change the way we see other people in the world. And second, Dr. Maibaum knows that the empathy she practices isn't perfect. She can't feel or think exactly what her friend feels or thinks. Of course not. Thinking that putting ourselves in someone else's shoes means we totally get them is a weakness of empathy. But you already know that limitation at a deeper level than you might think, and it has to do with your past life. So I'll give you an example from my own life. There's a time when I was a 22-year-old evangelical Christian pastor who listened to right-wing talk radio. I know this. I've seen photos of this smiling, short-haired guy, and have even read some of the sermons I delivered back then. You would not like them. I do not like them. Now, I know that was me back then, and I can remember some of the beliefs and even some of the emotions. But I can't really put myself back in my 22-year-old shoes and feel exactly the same way I did back then. I can't see the world through that guy's eyes perfectly anymore. In important ways, I'm not that person today. Still, I can use my memories and emotions from that time to identify with family and patients and students who might feel that way. Because I had that experience, I have some sense of what might motivate a person with those beliefs to act in a particular way, but I cannot fully put myself back in that spot. I can't remember what I could have been thinking. We all have a similar relationship in some ways to our past selves. We change, we grow, big things happen to us. Some of us have kids, some of us get in important love relationships, get married, have a partner, have deep friendships. We change, we grow, and we're no longer the people we once were. We have to imagine being back there to feel even a semblance of what we felt in those moments, and even then the memory is not perfect. Of course, then, when we practice empathy for another person, we have no chance of it being perfect. As I said before, I see empathy as a practice. I work with students in the hospital as they become spiritual care providers. Empathy is a central part of the work my students and I do together. In the beginning, most of them approach empathy the way a lot of us do. They stand at the shore of another person and they wait for waves of empathy to crash over them, just to come at them. And so when that doesn't happen, they might return from a visit and say something like, "I just didn't connect with the patient," or "that patient really irritated me." They're often seeing the patient's behavior through the lens of how it affects them, as is typically anybody's first reaction. My encouragement to them is to pause and practice empathy. And the most effective path to empathy, I think, is to get curious, to ask open-ended questions. What does it feel like to be in this situation? What do you most need right now? What guides you as you make this decision? And when we can't ask, or when people aren't able to find answers to those questions themselves, we can use our empathic imaginations, as imperfect as they may be, to do the best we can to put ourselves in their place. Now, it's tempting in this atmosphere to try to be the Simone Biles of empathy, to compete in the empathy Olympics. But, you know, maybe you can't find empathy just now for, I don't know, some figure in the news whose voice grates on you every time you hear it. Maybe there's somebody like that for you. But, so, you can't. But maybe empathy might help me relate to the person at work whose actions I cannot understand, who maybe really gets under my skin. Why would someone behave that way? That's not a bad question to ask yourself. Maybe not them right off. But to ask yourself, why would someone behave that way? What are their values? What are their beliefs? What are their experiences that lead them here? Getting curious moves us toward empathy, I think. Well, I want to close this morning by offering once more the quote from Hannah Arendt. The death of human empathy is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture about to fall into barbarism. Friends, we alone probably cannot save an entire civilization. But we can, each of us and together, practice empathy in individual relationships and the communities in which we interact. There is so much empathy and potential for empathy in each of us, and in a room like this one, full of big-hearted people who care, we can practice empathy in our circles of influence. And what a difference it will make if you and I, if each of us and all of us do that. May it be so. Now, friends, may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make their face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends, to serve love itself and to serve one another.
Sharing on our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.